Welcome and thank you for joining us for a look at the guided setup feature of Econolite's new ATC controller, Cobalt. My name is Jim Leslie, Business Development Manager here at Econolite, where I also served as the Interim Project Manager in 2012 for Cobalt's hardware development. Our objective is to walk you through the guided setup of this new controller. This feature leads you step by step through input of the standard parameters that you'll need to configure any typical intersection. This video will also show you some of the exciting aspects of Cobalt's touchscreen user interface. Okay, let's get started. It's important to note that the high-resolution color touchscreen here is a pressure-sensitive resistive type screen, which means that you can use gloves, your finger, or a stylus to operate it, unlike capacitive screens that require a bare finger. This has obvious benefits in colder regions, and yes, it has passed the glove test. This resistive type screen is also water resistant, so moisture will not trigger any inputs as would happen with a capacitive touchscreen found on smartphones. The 7-inch display is the largest in the industry and the most resolution, and has an anti-glare coating for easier viewing in sunlight. And at 800 nits, it's the brightest display in the industry. It has been tested outdoors in bright sunshine and is still easily viewable. Just remember, a little extra pressure is fine when using the screen. I'd also like to point out that the ATC requirements dictate only a small monochrome character LCD display, so you can see we certainly didn't stop there. We exceeded the ATC requirements in several other areas too, such as the amount of memory, processing power, and physical ports. Notice we've got 4 Ethernet ports, and the ATC spec only requires 2. We've got 2 USB 2.0 high-speed ports. The ATC spec only requires 1 version 1 port. Here's a look at the intersection example we're going to use for this video. It's a basic T intersection with 3 vehicle phases and 2 pedestrian phases. It's got only through movements, no left turns, and there are 8 detectors. You'll see 2 here, 2 here, 2 here, and then we've got pedestrian detectors as well. Okay, we're back at the controller, and you can see the signal status screen. To get to the guided setup from here, we're going to touch the home icon up in the top left, and then the options icon on the top right where we see guided setup. You'll see in the upper right there's a progress bar that will advance as we complete the steps in the guided setup, so you'll know how far in the process you are. There are also arrow keys to move to the next step or back to the previous step. So the first thing we're going to do is set up the cabinet, and this is a TS2 Type 1 cabinet. Let's add BIUs in positions 1 and 2 in the terminal and facilities, and let's also add one in one detector rack. We're also going to have an MMU, so we'll touch there to enable the MMU. Okay, let's go to the next screen. We'll touch the right arrow at the top. Notice that it momentarily turns a darker shade. That indicates that it's received your command. And this happens in other areas of the controller too. When you press an icon, it will turn a darker shade, and then you'll know that it has accepted that command. This is pretty self-explanatory, the date and time screen. We're going to set the time zone first. You notice this little icon comes up. We call this a scrubber, and what I can do is just move my finger over that, set it. We're going to set it to -8, which is the Pacific time zone. And as well, daylight savings I'll set to yes. Hit OK. Next screen. Notice the progress bar is moving a little bit each time. This is the Ethernet and communications setup screen. In this configuration, we're going to redo the IP addresses and basic settings just to show you how that's done. Let's say we want the controller's IP address to be 10.1.15.64. The address field here, we want 10.1, so 1, and I can use the scroll wheel here, tap over, put in 15, and lastly it'll be 64. Then for the net mask, I'm going to want 255, 255, 248, 0. And you notice I'm not hitting apply yet because I can do that at the end. Gateway will be 10.181. And if the number doesn't change much, you can also slide down here and move it to another value. When I went from 70 to 1, that would require a little bit more effort, so I just used the keypad. For the FTP server is the last thing. It'll be 10, 1, 15, 51. So we'll put 1, 15, 1. Let's apply all of that. We'll also want to configure the NTCIP settings, specifically the Ethernet UDP port. I'm going to tap here and we're going to put in 55502. So I'm going to put in a couple extra zeros because it can take many more numbers, so I need to make sure it zeroes that out. Now 55502, enter. Certainly if you wanted to, you can use the scroll wheel as well if you're making small changes. In this case, again, we'll just use the keypad. Now on to the next screen. This is the channel output screen, and it shows the type of movements that we have, or assignments that is, and the assignment to which phase, the approach type, and the movement type. In this intersection, if you recall, we were using phases 2, 6, and 8. And there was a little diagram that we'll show you now. This shows the channel outputs assigned channel 1 to phase 2, channel 3 to phase 8, channel 5 to phase 6, and then the two PEDs are assigned to channel 9 and 12, PEDs 2 and 8. So the first thing we will want to do is go to channel 1, and we just said that that'll be phase 2. So let me put that at phase 2. And you notice that it can take more than one digit, so it added that. I need to press a 0 and 2. So typically you put both digits in. And you'll see this little symbol come up that asks you whether you want to roll back or commit your changes. And that happens when a fairly critical change has been implemented. I can actually ignore that for now, and as I make changes, those changes will be queued up, and I can commit later or roll back later. We're not using channel 2, so I'm going to set that one to 0. You notice I can use the scrubber over here. And we'll also see this screen come up just reminding us that we have critical changes. We should either commit or roll back, or we can continue. And you can also have some selections here as to whether you want to extend the time. For instance, let's make this 5 minutes, and then I'll just hit continue. Again, it's queuing up the changes that I'm making. Okay, so if you remember from that diagram, channel 3 is going to be phase 8. So let me hit 0, 8. And let me use the scroll here. We're not going to use channel 4, so I'm going to set that to 0. And then we're going to set channel 5 to phase 6 and 0 out these others. Let's go back up to the type for a second, and I'm going to take away this setting here for the unused channels. You'll notice there's settings for overlap, pedestrian, vehicle, and effectively not used. So let's click there, or tap there, and do that for these unused channels. Next is the approach. Phase 2 is our approach going that direction. Phase 8 is going this direction. And phase 6 is going that direction. Notice you have some other directions. And the movement is all through movements. But to show you what the selections are, if I were to tap there, we have through movements and various types of turning movements. Let's go ahead and commit those changes. And there's a second screen. You'll notice an arrow on the right side here. That's for the rest of the channels. There's 16 channels in this controller. The first are typically vehicles, and the rest are pedestrian and overlaps. If you recall from the diagram, we're going to have channel 9 set to PED 2, so that's already okay, and channel 12 set to PED 8, so that's already good, but we're not using these others. So as we did before, let's remove those. As well as zero out these values. Oops. Again, if there is a digit in there and you put in what it thinks is going to be a 2-digit number, it will add that. Once in a while you'll find that, but you'll get familiar as you do this. I'm going to commit those changes, and we'll be ready to go to the next screen. Okay, the next screen is going to be the startup flash screen. Startup flash refers to the initial flash operation that the controller will implement after it boots up, before it begins its programmed operation. So again, to demonstrate changes, we'll set up this intersection to flash phases 2 and 6 yellow. Plus, we will set the initial startup phase to be phase 8 green. Okay, this is startup sequence 1, and the first thing we want to do is remove these assignments. I can say continue here. Remove those assignments. As we said, we're going to set the startup phase to be 8 green. And then the flash colors, we're going to have phases 2 and 6 flash yellow. And if you recall, channel 1 is phase 2. This shows channels, not phases down here. I highlight that, I'll put yellow, and then channel 5 is phase 6. The other thing we're going to set is the flash time, and we'll set the flash time to 6 seconds. So we can just use this if we'd like, so you get a feel for how that works. Let's commit those changes, and let's go on to the next screen. This is automatic flash. Automatic flash is something typically as you'd implement, say, late night at an urban intersection. Currently, we have it set, or the controller default is set to enter and exit flash from phases 2 and 6. We'll look at those icons in a second. What we're going to do is we're going to set this to enter and exit from phase 8. So the first thing let's do is remove these assignments to 2 and 6. So I'll hit none on 2 and 6. And again, that message will come up, but I can just ignore that for now and keep on making changes. We wanted phase 8 to be the phase that it completes before it goes into flash, and it's the first one that it goes into after it comes out of flash. So when I highlight that, you'll notice that we can have none. We can have entry. This icon shows an arrow going into the flash, an exit, which is the flash, and then an arrow coming out, meaning it's coming into this phase, or both. The next thing we want to do is set up which phases to flash simultaneously. In this case, let's have phases 2 and 6 flash together. So 2 and 6 again are on channels 1 and 5. We set those up deliberately just so we could remind you that channels and phases are a little different. So I'm going to turn off those and set 2 and 6 to flash together. And if I wanted those to flash yellow, for instance, instead of red, in our T intersection it might be safe to have those movements flashing yellow, or put them back to red. Let's commit those changes. We also have the screens to tell it how it's going to go into flash, whether it's going to directly go into flash from phase 8. Is it going to service all active calls, or put recalls until entry, or put all phases on recall and then go into flash. Same thing with exit. you can exit to walk, to green, to yellow, and so forth. So in this case, we'll just leave it to exit to walk from flash. Okay, let's go to the next screen. This screen is the vehicle detector setup screen. So we'll use this to set up the detectors and assignments of those detectors to phases for the basic T intersection. Cobalt enables up to 64 detectors and up to 4 plans. Notice we have plan 1 showing here. So to start, what we can do is just scan through and look at the different detectors and what they're assigned to. So I can tap here, and you'll see as I go from detector 1 to 2 to 3, you can scan and look and see what they're set to. Let's take a minute to review that diagram again for the basic T intersection. You'll see that detectors 1 and 2 are assigned to phase 6, detectors 3 and 4 to phase 2, 5 and 6 to phase 8, and we have detectors for the PEDs, which we'll go through on the next screen. So detector 1 was phase 2, detector 2, actually, I'm sorry, let me go back. Detector 1 was actually phase 6. Any of you catch that? Detector 2 was phase 6. 3 and 4 are both phase 2. Sometimes you have to wait just a slight moment. And wait for the number to come up and then enter, otherwise your entry may not be accepted. Detector 5 is 8 along with detector 6, phase 8, detector 6, phase 8 as well. And let's just scroll back and make sure we got those right. So 5 and 6 should be 8. Four and 3 are 2. And the last two, 1 and 2, are both 6. Okay, let's go on to pedestrian detectors. Okay, now we'll set up the pedestrian detector assignments. As we remember from the diagram, there's 2 pedestrian detectors, detector 9 for PED 2 and detector 12 for PED 8. So PED 2 is phase 2 effectively, and so detector 9 is what that will be. And we can use this scroll key to go over to PED 8 and set that to 12, and I can of course use this scrubber as well. Let's also zero out the other phases since there's no detectors assigned to those. So perhaps I can just use the keypad like that. I can also do it like that. Just to show you various ways, I tap in the screen there. I can also hold, and you notice it will move quickly. Again, let's just try keypad. Okay, ready for the next screen. This is the phase order screen, and what we'll do is set the phases and where they are found in the ring sequences. As you know from the diagram, we're only using phases 2, 6, and 8. So first thing we'll do is remove the phases we're not using. If I just tap on a phase, you notice it gets highlighted or outlined, and then I get some selections. I'll just say remove selected. Notice even after I've removed it, it stays highlighted, and that's for being able to swap with another phase, which I'll show in a minute. Let me turn that off, and I'll go ahead and remove these other phases that are not needed. 7. And we're not going to need 4. But the one thing we might want to do is put phase 8 in ring 1 instead of ring 2, which means it would be in the upper area. So I can highlight those 2 of those and hit swap selected and it'll move them over, or if I wanted to put it in a different position over here, I could do that as well. And as changing phases, as we've done, is a fairly critical operation in the operation of the intersection, we're going to get that message about whether you want to commit or roll back those changes. So let's go ahead and commit. And it doesn't matter if you leave something highlighted, I can just go ahead and go to the next screen. The next 5 screens make up the timing plan. We're going to be entering some values for the various parameters, although I won't be changing all of them, just due to time. Plus, there's typically not a need to change every one of them. Remember, this is a very basic intersection, and probably not something that's completely realistic, but is a good example for this video. The first thing we'll probably want to do is name the timing plan. You'll notice if I tap, it'll show that there's 4 available timing plans. To name one, just touch the icon on the top right, and then we'll select Rename Plan. As with any regular keyboard, there's a Shift key. I can Shift for a capital, turn that off. Let's just name it Test. I'll hit OK, and we've renamed the plan. You'll notice the virtual keypad is still displayed. To turn that off, tap on the far right upper the option menu, and we'll just tap again in that empty space, and that turns that virtual keypad off. For min green, let's put in, say, 7 seconds for the min green. And because it can take a 2-digit number, I put 07 if you recall from before. And I need to hit enter, of course, when I'm using the keypad. If I use the scroll bar, I don't need to hit enter, so I'll put 7 for that. Let's just leave those 2 like that. Go to the next screen, the passage time screen. For vehicle extension, I'm going to change first one, say, to 3, and the second one as well. Notice that as I'm changing, this is expecting decimal points. These are seconds, so it has granularity down to tenths of seconds. In this case, I could use the keypad and put in 30 because it's expecting 3.0. And then scroll to the next one, 30, and hit enter. The next screen. For max green, I'm going to change what we have here. I'll put in 40 seconds, for instance, for the first couple. Phase 2 and phase 6, we'll say 40 seconds. And then let's reduce phase 8 to 25 seconds. And on to the next screen, the pedestrian times for walk. Let's make the phase 2 7 seconds. Remember, there is no ped on phase 6, so we'll make that 0. And then for ped 8, let's make that 5 seconds. Well, it's already 5 seconds, so let's leave that. And then clearance time for the ped, we'll leave that 10. Let's make this one, say, 9. So I put 09. And again, 6 isn't used, so we'll make that 0. And then finally, the clearance time, the yellow change, we'll make that a decimal, 3.5, for instance, instead of 3. Again, I can increment or put in 3.5 and 3.5. Let's make the last one 3.3, for instance. And red clearance, we'll make this one 1, 2. Oops. 0. Zero that number out. 1, 2. And again, just demonstrating the various ways to do that. You notice our scroll or our progress bar is almost at the end, and if we go to the recall page, it's completely full, and therefore we're at the last page. So under minimum vehicle recalls, I'm going to put a min recall in phases 2 and 6, just as an example, and when I hit the right arrow, it'll take us right back to the home screen because we're finished with the guided setup. So there you have it, the process of going through step by step how to set up your intersection with all the most common features and settings. Now the last thing we'll do for this video is to show you how to save this configuration off to a USB memory stick. So I've got a memory stick here. I'll go ahead and insert it. What you'll see is that the controller will automatically recognize that, and a new icon appears up here. It shows both a USB symbol and an SD card symbol. If you recall, there's an SD card slot on the far left over here. So if I touch that, we'll get some options that will come up. Software update, database update, and save all. Let's just hit save all. It says printing log to USB, and effectively it's saving the data off to our USB stick as we speak, and it says print log to USB complete. All done. I can go back to the home screen if I want. I've got my configuration to go. Well, that's it for the video. We really hope you've enjoyed and learned a lot from this overview of the guided setup for the Cobalt controller. Thanks for watching this video on the Econolite Cobalt ATC traffic controller guided setup using our basic T intersection example. Hopefully you've come away with a better understanding of how Cobalt exceeds many of the ATC specifications, as well as a better understanding of the touchscreen user interface and the intuitive operating system. And I'm sure you'll agree, setup and operations is easier than ever with Cobalt. If you have any additional questions or would like to receive any additional information, please contact your Cobalt support team. Thank you.